Hi, I'm David Barefoot, and this is the Holy Shyft podcast. And here's the place we look at the science and the art of life and living. And if you notice, Holy Shyft has a Y in the word shift, and it's because, or a way to remember, that there's always an intersection in any given moment. And that intersection is there to remind us that there's a world-based less than outcome that's possible, and there's an other than set apart outcome that's possible. The word holy for Holy Shyft in its original meaning was set apart, special. Like if you have something that you keep in your home, pots, pans, dishes, and then there's that special glass. That's the set apart glass. Or if you have people in your life, like your wife and your kids, they're special, they're set apart, right? Versus just the less than, the other than, that's disposable, if you will. So the concept of that intersection is the reminder that every moment that we choose to be present and be aware of how we want to respond and make the lean into the direction of the other than outcome versus just be on default, on autopilot, and take what typically comes by accident. Have you ever had an accident? Like you're walking through the kitchen, you're carrying a glass and juggling too many things at once, and there's an accident. What happens? Falls to the ground, and you say, "Holy shit." So this is about going from holy shit moments to holy shift moments, which calls for two things. One, being aware that there is an intersection, and you being aware that you are responsible. It's your choice, regardless of the circumstances. The power of taking personal responsibility is something we talk about a lot here at Holy Shyft. Won't be our topic for today, but just remember that you and your life become radically empowered when you choose to take complete and total responsibility for you and your life, regardless of the circumstances. But you don't understand. I live in a bad place. You don't understand. My dad was abusive. You don't understand. We didn't have any money. Like on and on it goes. And your facts are accurate. But your opportunity to take total responsibility for where you're at and where you want to go literally transforms you from the inside out and creates things, opportunities, and the ability to see what you couldn't see before. The opportunity to hear what you couldn't hear before. That saying that when the student's ready, the teacher appears. I just have you consider the teachers are always there. It's just when you get prepared to see them, hear them, then you notice them. Just as an example, so I never talked to you about, say, a type of car that you've never really paid much attention to, and a color also that you never thought of. So like a red Volkswagen Jetta. But as soon as someone talks about the red Volkswagen Jetta, the next thing you know, over the next week, you seem to see 10, 11, 12, 13 of them. They were always there. It's just your reticular activating system has now been tuned in to see the red Jetta. So similarly with the Holy Shyft concept, the science and the art of life and living, which is what's intended for you, then all of a sudden the world looks differently. So I say what's intended. Let's talk about that a little bit. To appreciate Holy Shyft, what it could mean to you, I got to be transparent and share what it meant to me and where it came from. This really goes back 10, 12 years. The build up to that, I'll cover some other time, but so 10, 12 years ago, really about 12 years ago, so that takes us back to me being around 38. And leading up to 38, my 20s, I got started early as an entrepreneur, had a blast learning new things, built a couple businesses, built one and then helped build another little one, small businesses. Then went into the financial services industry and was blessed with good mentors, hard work, and just had this amazing ascension. And in that space, I was operating over compensating or at least outproducing the limiting beliefs I had from my childhood. So even though I got altitude and got great traction and achieved success and was living a life where I was making more money than I ever thought I'd be able to make, more money than all my peers, and then all of a sudden working less and less and making more and more and recurring revenue. And by the time I'm in my young 30s, I could work a 10 or 12-hour work week. It was just amazing. It was this great thing. However, the challenge is because of my limiting beliefs and not having healed from that and taking total responsibility for my life, I ended up growing into being an asshole. Not intentionally, it's just I was operating with values that came from societization and the environment I was raised in, and from my parents or my father in particular, and he couldn't give me what he didn't have. So as a result, I wasn't in a place where I made the right choices to continue to expand my capacity, to continue to grow. Instead, I started to protect. So I went from being willing to risk it all and learn and look for mentors and look for teachers and just consume content and just constantly evolve and apply the science and art of living. I started to protect and started to reinforce a scarcity mindset where I was worried about what I would lose and how to hold on to what I have, how to calculate what's the least amount I have to do to get what I want. Think about that. It's not like I actively would have said that out loud and said, oh, that's a great strategy. But what happened was I all of a sudden wanted that comfort, and I started to lean into needing that certainty and protecting. So with that scarcity mindset, the next thing you know, I'm practicing the very act of what I'll call, and you'll hear it here at Holy Shyft often, dying versus living. So if we're talking about the art and science of living and life, the opposite of that would be death and dying. Necrosis of cells, everything on this earth and in this paradigm, this world that you and I live in, is dying. Pause and think about that. We put a seed in the ground, plant, water, it gets sunshine, life emerges. That seed has life in it. It literally has vitality is the word that's used, and they use a seed as an example. Within that seed is vitality, and Holy Shyft is in great part focused on vitality. So when I say it's the art and the science and art of life, I really mean it's the art and science of vitality. And so that seed has vitality. However, from the moment it's watered, fertilized, germinates, blooms, it's now begun a life on its way to death. It's actually dying. Every thought, every opportunity you have is a seed. It's actually dying unless you apply the art of vitality, the science of vitality first, and then the art of vitality. So that's what we're going to talk about Holy Shyft on and on and on, again. So if you want to continue to reinforce making the other than choice, part one was knowing that there is one. Part two is being in a shifted state already. Will you stay there all the time? No way. At least so far, I've never met anyone who does, and I've been working at it now for years, and it's something you come in and out of. That said, there is the ability to constantly increase your red line. We called it in a previous podcast, if you want to look that one up, the concept that what is your threshold where you would come out of, in this case, I'm going to say out of that shifted state where you are in abundance instead of scarcity, where you have your eyes focused on life instead of death, and you're able to see and hear what wants to be seen. You're able to be led by God, by this power bigger than you, and act accordingly. The coming out of that state or into that state, that threshold line, that red line, you can increase the capacity of that red line by putting in the reps, by actively practicing being in a shifted state or in that holy shit state, in that place where just yesterday I'm with my wife, things are going great. She asks me a question. I'm already tight on the topic, has to do with planning, and I thought we made a commitment to an event, and we talked about it, but in her mind we didn't lock in the commitment. In my mind, we did. I'm not wrong. She's not wrong. They were our perceptions. I did not take personal responsibility in that moment to reinforce, are we on the same page? Is this our plan? Where are we going? Especially since I know from history that that would have been the better practice, but I didn't. So now, fast forward, later in the day I come home having already acted as if and started to tell people about our plan, only to find out that she thought we still were going to talk about it again. So she got a little tight and frustrated. It triggered me. I was tight already, so I behaved a way that I used to behave a few years ago before I had healed in this place. And I got frustrated and I got tight and I started to project that on her, and that all that did was cause her trust in this area to go down. Why? Because I was in a shifted state. So fortunately, we talked it through and recovered, but it doesn't change the fact that I made a withdrawal from that bank account, from her being able to trust that I'm paying attention to the things that matter to us both. And so just a quick example of shifted state. We got to move on because we're talking about the science and the art of vitality, of life, of living. So with that in mind, I said I needed to share with you my shift journey at a high level. We'll talk about different component parts now and then throughout the Holy Shyft podcast. But going back that 12 years ago, here I am on the other side of my mid-late 20s and early 30s of that financial services business, and taking ground and all of a sudden reinforcing this scarcity mindset, this protection, this certainty piece. And so I started to level off and just work less, make the same, start to build the recurring income. So it was going up without me having to work. I'm thinking I'm winning, but it doesn't feel like it. Some of you can relate where you've had success in your business, you're having success financially, and yet you don't feel fulfilled. And some of you are listening, well, that's a God thing. You must not have had a good relationship with God. Actually, I would agree, but you would have thought I did. I had also along that way learned and come to a place where I knew I needed to fill a hole in my soul in my 20s. And I fortunately had someone share with me, there is a God bigger than me, bigger than this whole universe. And that if I just trusted him and said, you take over, that life would be better. And so I did. And it was amazing for a few days, probably a few weeks. But then I started to show up to a building and started to follow other men in particular, but men and women that were living out this Christian life. And because I wanted to be coachable, I did what they did what they said, never really paying attention to the fact that deep down inside they weren't vital. They weren't living a life that was shifted. They were doing what they were told to do. And so, and by the way, I don't want to take away from the experience. It was amazing. My life continued for years and years to be fulfilled in many ways from this encounter with God. But the rules and the performance-based mindset that God set us free from were the very things that caused me to limit my encounter with a real relationship. And as the more I did, the worse it got. The closer I got to people that were really my teachers and mentors, the more I saw their unshifted life, their dissatisfaction. And I got to see how they just took their unbelief and pushed it to the side, or had some scripture to deal with it and to do what I call faith it. You ever faithed it before? You hit a crossroad, you don't know what the answer is, and so you just say, but God is good. Or, but God works all things together for good. Or if you're not as religious, as people would call it, or not as faithful even, faith-based, excuse me. And just from a secular standpoint, we have those same things where we go, you know what? But all things work out the way they're supposed to. We have this way of grin and bear it. No pain, no gain. Let's go. Let's move. And forward we go, believing that we're taking ground when the truth is we've just taken a story that's limiting us. We've reinforced it, and then tucked it away back in the closet for it to sit there in the dark and just grow. Like get moldy and toxic, things that are not. Death grows when given space to grow. It's why, they tell you to refrigerate stuff instead of put it in dark, moist places where it can grow. And yet that's what we do with these stories that limit us, as opposed to take them into the light, look at them, see if we really align with them so that we can get rid of them and be free. So the Holy Shyft story, to bring all this together, at that around 38, I just reached a place in life where I said, okay, in spite of having some success in business, in spite of having now at that point, I was 5 years maybe into my second marriage. You'll learn on the Holy Shyft podcast, I was married for 12 years, got married young at 19, 2 kids, awesome experience there. And fortunately, we have a great relationship with my ex, kids, thriving through all that amazingly, again, by the grace of God. The point there was, I'm 38, 5 years into the marriage. Marriage is fulfilling and beautiful, supposedly. Business is going well. My health is in good shape. I've got this relationship with God. And yet, it's not satisfying. Something's missing. And so I refuse to settle. I refuse to keep just faithing it. And I said, this isn't working. My wife actually was the front runner there, and she just railed. She would sit up in bed in the middle of the night and say, just start cursing at God. Go, God, if you're real, you need to show yourself. I'm not going to live like this anymore. And so fortunately, we had a home group, if you will, that was multi-churched. It wasn't religious-based at all, and yet it were people that believed in the fact that there is a God, that he has an amazing son, Jesus Christ, and that is the answer, but the way we've been doing it isn't working. And so that group, for a number of years, we just continued to reach out and find people that would come and teach and train and visit. We pursued. And so the theme that God uncovered is we are in the control seat from the standpoint of surrendering and seeking a real relationship instead of practicing the science. The art of it is when you start to make it intimate and make it real. It's the same in your marriage. The only metaphor throughout the Bible for the intimate, set apart, passionate, intentional love affair that God has with you and wants with you is marriage. There's nothing else. And remember, in marriage, it's spirit, it's soul, it's also body. The only way to fully embrace and understand it, the word know that's used in the Old Testament when it talks about Abraham knowing Sarah, they're talking about knowing each other physically and having a child. So God's saying, look, it's body, soul, and spirit being one. That's the only way to understand the pursuit that I have for you as my favorite. You are God's favorite. He made everything for you. So I don't care what your religion is. In fact, if you don't have one, that's better. If you haven't been willing to trust God and trust people who say you should believe in God, great. You're in the best place ever to go, you know what? I don't know about all that religion, but if there is a real creator that created everything, and that creator wants an intimate, passionate relationship with me, he created me as his special, set-apart one, and he did, and I'm challenging you to test it. Then, when you say yes, something transforms. So that pursuit was something that we just continue to dig into. And in the process, we uncovered a technology. In fact, I'm going to have a guest on the podcast who's the one that walked me through this, that enabled us to strip away and do the meta levels and get rid of all the cognitive limitations and stories that were preventing me from admitting to what was standing in my way, what was keeping me in scarcity, what was keeping me in self-protection. And it really boiled down to just getting honest, rot gut honest about where I'm at and how I feel about it in any and every area. We called it getting mad. And it was a 2-hour process, physically railing. Sometimes we did it with somebody taking a bat and just hitting it against a bed over and over and over again. For me, it was silly, but it was a wet rag that I kept throwing to the ground. But picture me standing right now and viscerally, aggressively taking this rag and throwing it to the ground. I was sore the next day from this repetition of throwing this wet rag to the ground. But as I did it and it went on deeper and deeper, I just started to strip back anything and everything I'm mad about in my life. Had no idea what would start to come out. I talked about the anger I had about the coaches that were never the men that I needed them to be, the mentors. I constantly had been seeking in life for men that would be a mentor, a coach, and every single one of them let me down because I was putting them on a pedestal that they didn't belong on. So inevitably, strip that all down, and I get to the root of it. I'm exhausted. I got tears running down my face, and I say, I didn't even think anybody heard me. I just said, I don't trust you, God. And I know what I meant, and so did he. I don't trust that you exist. I don't trust that you care. I don't trust that it's real, and I don't trust that it has any bearing in my life or that I'm even worthy of it. Any of those that you want to pick. And now I'm just defeated and empty sitting there. And I heard, might as well have been audibly, a voice say, finally, we can talk. And over the next 3 weeks, the intimate conversations that I experienced with this creator of all things was radical. I don't care where you're at. You need to experience it. There's something in you that knows it. I'm not witnessing to you. I'm not telling you have to. I'm just telling you and having you consider, why wouldn't you test whether he is really real? And there's really a relationship that you can enjoy that's full of life and power and vitality and unlimited potential. So, since it's real, I'm never going back. I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unfeel what I've felt. Do I go in and out of it? You bet, especially the journey from then till now, the number of times that I was in a pit of despair because I'd now tasted it. I knew what was missing. It's even worse once you've tasted it, because then I'm like, what am I doing here? But there were all these stories I was still clinging to. So in the science and art of vitality, of life, that we constantly will be visiting here, if that matters to you, just know that there is a present reality, and it's all that matters. And your present reality is either being defined by you and this relationship with something bigger than you, or it's being defined by your past. It's one or the other. And I would have you consider that a massive part of your life, your present experience with yourself, with your wife, with your kids, in your ability to build and grow business and make more money and enjoy life, hobbies, anything, you name it, those things are being influenced in the present by a past version of yourself, an experience from the past. Joe Dispenza teaches on it amazingly in his book, How to Become Supernatural. Dr. Ben Hardy, with his book, Gap in the Gain, 10X is easier than 2X, on and on. Just you can follow his stuff. I want to wrap this up for us. The point is they go into this very topic we're on, which is your past self defining your present reality will never work. You need to, in the present, define your past. And so for me, just as an example, my dad was verbally abusive. As a result, I learned to protect myself by just not being emotionally available. As long as I didn't have any needs emotionally, as long as I didn't convey my emotions, then he couldn't hurt me. And his verbal abuse caused me to retreat anyway. If I spoke, I got in more trouble. When I didn't speak, I got in trouble as well when he asked the question I didn't answer. But either way, by me shutting down. And so that reality was carried all the way into my 20s and all the way into my young 30s, resulting in me starting to protect and go into that scarcity mindset and not have a need for new hopes and new desires, and not lean into even my second marriage, which would have ended up in divorce if this didn't change. Because for that marriage to thrive and be the source of power that's intended for you and for me, We've got to be emotionally available. We've got to take the risk. We've got to lean in and pursue each other's heart. And for me to pursue her heart, my heart has to be available. So this process of choosing the shift came from simply this. We said this is about the science and art of vitality in life. And I would have you consider setting aside every belief you have about the Bible. So you're one of a couple of scenarios. Either you don't believe in it at all and you've never said yes and it scares you to think about religion. Fantastic, you're in a great place. Take whatever preconceived notions you had about the Bible, set them aside. I'm going to give you a new paradigm in just a moment. Or you're somebody who loves the Bible and has lived with the Bible and goes to church or has gone to church now and then and considers the Bible to have some connection to God and words of truth and believe that that should be the foundation to everything. Some of you cling to the Bible as the only source of truth. I'm asking both of you to have the guts that God's big enough for you to lay down your preconceived notions and just consider for a moment the New Testament is a bunch of letters of people giving witness to what they saw and what they experienced with God. So I'm giving you living scripture right now when I share with you what God has done through his word in me. And in doing so, there's a scripture in 2 Corinthians, it's 3:16 and 17, and it comes right after Paul has described this legalistic, religious-based, performance-based existence and how less than it is. And he defines that, and then like a break in all of history, he says, but when you turn, and what he means is turn from self-righteous, self-control, self-protection, that whole paradigm and way of living, the less than holy shit existence, and turn instead. The moment you turn, the Spirit comes. What Spirit? The Spirit of the living God comes. And where the Spirit is, there is liberty. That word is free, which also comes with life and vitality. So there's liberty, there's freedom, and then we look as if in a mirror at the glory of God, the glory of all creation, of unlimited abundance. We look at it as a mirror. If you look in a mirror, what do you see? You see yourself, the version that was intended, the shifted version. So we're going to pick up on this next time, but just imagine now if you had a pattern and a way to, whenever needed, reset and be able to turn and course correct and go from that less than state that yields a bunch of holy shit outcomes in your life to a shifted state where you're in a response mode instead of a react mode, and where you're in a space that you're ready to see what wants to be seen, hear what wants to be heard, and live the shifted life where you have both the science and the art, and you're able to be the vitality that the moment calls for your wife, for your kids, for you, and for you to rise and shine, take new ground, and then enjoy it, and then be ready to take new ground again. So, thanks for hanging out. This was a long one. Welcome to the Holy Shyft journey. Excited about you taking this with us. Hey, there's somebody you know that probably needs to be exposed to a better approach to life and go from holy shit outcomes to holy shift outcomes. Let them know about this podcast if you would. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And let's continue to lean into the science and art of vitality and vital living. This has been the Holy Shyft Podcast. I'm David Barefoot. See you soon.